Chairman Mulvaney, Ranking Member Chu, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the invitation and opportunity to provide testimony on this very important issue. In addition to being President of Information International Associates, I'm also a member of the Professional Services Council and serve on their board, so I'm pleased to testify on behalf of many other small businesses at PSC. The insourcing actions that we have had that was most significant impact on us has been for the Department of Defense and particularly the Air Force. So I'll focus a little bit on our experiences from the Air Force today. But similar activities are taking place across the government. We are proud of the quality and level of service we provide the nation's military men and women. We have done work on over 15 Air Force bases. Our contract performance has been outstanding. Our contract prices have saved as much as 33% over previous government in-house costs. Our work has never been identified as inherently governmental. In fact, we continue to do that work, as do other contractors across the whole Air Force. Yet despite these performance metrics, we've lost 16% of our employees to insourcing by the Air Force over the last 8 months, and we hear rumblings about the potential for another 15%. Amen when I say we do agree with the strategic need of the Federal Government to strengthen performance of inherently governmental functions, particularly the Federal acquisition workforce, and also in areas where the government must have internal expertise to manage agency mission. Coming from Oak Ridge, I hope the government has internal nuclear expertise. Where insourcing fulfills a validated strategic need, we support its proper use. As a taxpayer, of course, I wholeheartedly support saving the taxpayers' money. However, the tactical methods of implementing the insourcing requirement and the impacts on the Air Force mission raise grave concerns for us. What we have observed is that decisions to insource are driven more by arbitrary budget and manpower bogeys than by the objectives of enhancing the government's workforce capabilities or by true cost savings. Furthermore, the reprehensible tactics of directly recruiting our staff before official notice is given about the government's even decision to insource is highly inappropriate. Finally, where insourcing decisions were based on cost savings, the cost analysis of how the deliberations were made have not been transparent, and there really is no effective mechanism for a contractor to gain enough information in appropriate time. In addition to the faults in the decision and transition process, once the insourcing occurs, we do not believe that there is any meaningful internal or external oversight to ensure that the claimed savings and desired programs objectives have been achieved. In fact, quite the contrary. What we see is evidence that insourced positions have not been fulfilled and services to our warfighters have in fact been diminished. In my written testimony, I provided 3 case studies where outsourcing has occurred to the detriment of my company. Rather than going into the details here, I would like to address some recommendations that can be done to perhaps fix some of the problems created by inappropriate insourcing. First, in the issue of transparency, and I think we're saying many of the same things, Congress should insist on more transparency for any contract which is considered for insourcing. From the moment the consideration begins, some kind of an ombudsman or ombuds process should be appointed to work with industry to assure an appropriate and fair process is followed. Another recommendation in transparency is part of that process. Actions taken to fulfill the requirements should be documented and made available to the contractor before contracts are terminated. Going through the FOIA route is not giving people information when they need it to have any kind of reasonable ability to take action. Next, in the issue of competition. When the government is pricing a contracted function, the contractor also should be allowed to put in a price to ensure that the taxpayer is indeed getting the best price. 5 years after a contract begins, the contractor might in fact have lower prices to offer. Unless there is significant and special justification in insourcing, small businesses should be allowed to complete the contract with all of the options exercised and not stopped in the middle. Special justification should be required. Transition planning and consequences. and I emphasize the word consequences. The government should demonstrate that it can transition the contract just as a contractor would be required to meet a transition plan. There should be consequences to the government's failure, just like there are to a contractor when commitments are not met. Ongoing reviews of process during performance should be required. This is like the letter of obligation that's applicable under A76, and some form of it should be used and enforced. And finally, and probably most problematic, is inappropriate recruitment. Poaching, and I hope you've heard that word before, and other questionable recruitment practices aimed at contractor employees on contracts targeted for conversion should be dealt with. It's against regulations, and it has a significant financial impact on the contractor. We recommend where the workforce is converted from private to public sector positions, the government should actually compensate contractors for the cost of hiring and training those personnel. If the government did not take them over, they would have to incur these costs. At a minimum, these costs should be considered in the cost analysis. So we are proud to do the work we do and are proud to support the important missions of our government. What we ask for is fair opportunity to compete and a government that makes the right decisions for the right reasons. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I am pleased to answer questions.